Hello, and good evening. Welcome back to Beyond the Pages, where we enjoy tales of science fiction and horror from the current volume of the anthology Coagulation. Tonight, the nightmare reaches its terrifying climax. The shadow grows stronger, its whispers louder, and Peter's grip on the present slips entirely. What happens when you can no longer tell where the past ends and the present begins? When the memories you've tried to bury claw their way out of your very soul? This final part of Beyond the Pages, Shadow Haunting, will answer that question, and it is far darker than you can imagine. I'm Cora Poe, and this is Slumber Myth, a place for insomnia fuel. The past, once a distant memory, is no longer content to stay hidden in the shadows. It is coming for Peter, dragging him deeper into a nightmare from which there is no escape. In the previous chapters, we watched as Peter's reality began to unravel, his every waking moment haunted by a shadow, his own reflection twisted into something dark and dangerous. Tonight's conclusion to Peter's story comes from the chilling pages of Coagulation 8, Nostalgia. If you've enjoyed this haunting tale, consider supporting the Coagulation Foundation and its talented creators by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoagulationfoundation. If you followed Peter's descent into madness, thank you for joining us on this chilling journey. If you haven't yet, you can catch up, but be warned, the end will leave you questioning everything. If you haven't seen the videos before this one, please go watch Beyond the Pages Shadow Haunting Part 1 and 2 before continuing with this video, or there will be spoilers. And if you've enjoyed this delightfully horrible tale by Noel Mills, consider supporting the Coagulation Foundation by purchasing your own copy of the book from which it came, Coagulation 8, Nostalgia, available from our printing partner, Lulu.com. Now, gather your courage, for the final chapter begins. Peter stared down at the phone number until his cup of tea grew cold beside it. Every bit of him was filled with dread, like a sponge choked with too much water.
Just do it already.
He cursed at himself, putting his finger to the rotary. It only took a moment for the operator to patch him through. A gruff voice answered.
Darling Residence, Mr. Darling speaking. Hello, Mr. Darling, it's Peter. Is Wendy there?
The voice that followed boomed, and Peter ripped his ear away for a moment before gently easing it closer.
Peter, my boy, how good to hear from you. Why, it's been ages. Yes, Wendy is around here somewhere. Just a moment.
It was a small thing, but the warmth in Mr. Darling's voice when he greeted Peter reminded him of how good it felt to be part of a family. He had been so afraid after Wendy called off the engagement that there would be bitterness between them and her family, for they had always been kind to Peter, and after losing his own family, it had been a great comfort. A dog barked at the end of the line, and he was about to ask how Nana was doing when a familiar, gentle voice answered the phone. Hello, Peter? Even through the phone, she had the soft voice of an angel.
Wendy.
He breathed, suddenly realizing how nice it felt to have her name on his tongue once more. Yes, I'm here, she said, sounding somewhat concerned. Peter, we haven't heard from you in an age. Not since Michael left for Oxford. And that was months ago. Is everything all right?
Sorry, I know I should have called, but I wanted to give you space and time.
He admitted, feeling like the shy schoolboy as he said it. Oh, Peter, please. There's really no need. Really, I'm fine. More worried about you, to be honest. Are you well? Pinpricks of tears formed behind his eyes, suddenly brought on by her casual kindness. She had worried about him, had cared enough to worry.
No,
He cut himself off, clenching his fist tight. No, he wouldn't lie to her. She was the one person who would understand.
Actually, that's the thing. I'm not doing very well at the moment.
He faltered, biting his lip for a moment. Peter? What is it? Are you ill? Do you need someone to come check up on you? Her voice was like a gentle caress. He shook his head, hating himself for how weak he felt saying the words.
It's the shadow, Wendy. I'm seeing the shadow again. So, no, I'm not doing too well at the moment, I fear.
He bit down on his lip to keep it from trembling. All at once, words came to him, and he wanted to tell her everything. And he wanted to cry and run far away and hide and tell her he loved her still, that he wanted her back and that he should never have let her go. And yet, he also wanted her to stay away from him, to stay away from the shadow and the curse he brought upon anyone he cared about. He wanted her to call him mad and yell at him and tell him he was right to stay away from the family and that they should say good riddance once and for all. But she didn't. Wendy's tone was quiet and understanding. He didn't need to give details. She knew. She has survived Neverland herself. The shadow is back? Can you see it? Does it talk to you? His voice creaked like a rusty door hinge.
Yes.
There was a moment of silence on the line, but he knew she wouldn't leave him or mock him. Okay, she said gently. Okay, what can I do to help? He drew in a long, steadying breath.
Do you still have that card for the counselor fellow we spoke to after, well, you know?
Yes, I must have it somewhere in my address book. Just give me a moment. The sound of a drawer opening and rustling papers was all he heard for a minute as she searched.
If you can't find it, I understand. It's been several years.
Got it, she cried in triumph. Yes, Dr. Richard Shreves. He's over in Paddington now, on Wimbledon Street. But it's spelled with the M-O-N in the middle, so make sure you write down the address correctly. Oh, I'll just spell it out for you. Have you got a pen and paper? He wrote it out as carefully as he could, following her instructions. A moment of silence lingered at the end, neither of them wanting to hang up the phone on the other.
Thanks, Wendy, for the information and, well, everything.
Of course, Peter. I only want you to be well. You will call again, won't you? Soon? And tell me when the shadow goes away, won't you?
If it goes away, yes, of course I will.
Not if, Peter, when. When you defeat the shadow, you'll call. Don't you dare let him win. You'll put up a good fight, and you'll beat it. His eyes stung, and he smiled despite himself.
Of course, I will.
You'd better. I'll be waiting to hear from you. Don't forget.
I promise,
he said, picturing the firm, hands-on-hips pose she was surely taking at the moment. Good. Talk soon, darling.
Of course, Miss Darling.
He ended with their private joke. It was a silly piece from a past that no longer was, and yet it grounded him for a moment in a peace he had not felt in days. The shadow leered at him as he stepped up to the front door with Dr. Richard Shreves in faded black paint on the glass window.
You're wasting your time, Peter.
Biting his lip, Peter tapped on the bronze door knocker 4 times, waiting with what little patience, stress, and exhaustion had left him with. His eyes darted over to the shadow, but he shook his head and straightened his posture as he heard footsteps approaching from the other side of the door.
The doctor will only call you mad. They'll lock you up and throw away the key.
Peter took a slow, deep breath, trying to push the shadow's words from his mind as the door opened, and a portly man who bore an uncanny likeness to his neighbor's Schnauzer, with a straight trimming of lanky gray hair, heavy brows that obscured his beady eyes, and a thick matching mustache that hid his lips entirely. But his cheeks tugged at the mustache in a friendly way that he stepped aside and gestured for Peter to enter.
Ah, Mr. Pan, I take it. Do come in. Mind the floors. They've recently been waxed.
He led Peter down a narrow hall and into a room that was lined with wall-to-wall books, save for one small window, which allowed enough light for the plant on the windowsill to die a slow, drawn-out death. But there was a fire burning in the hearth, and the chair he was offered was quite comfortable. The scent of old dusty books, mixed with the wood smoke, was a calming one, and Peter felt more at ease than he had in a while. The wing-backed chair creaked as Dr. Shreve sat across from him and picked up a notepad, wetting the tip of a fountain pen with his tongue. He focused his attention on Peter.
So, Mr. Pan, it has been a long while, hasn't it? But I never forget a face,
he said proudly.
Now, what brings you to see me today?
Peter's mouth opened and closed several times, resembling a fish out of water. Yet, try as he might, he could not summon the words to begin. Even in his head, he knew he sounded insane.
Tick-tock, Peter. Time to walk the plank. The crocodile's waiting.
Biting his tongue, Peter mulled over how to phrase what was happening in a way that wouldn't get him thrown into an asylum.
I suppose, in some ways, the reason I'm here now is the same reason I spoke to you all those years ago.
Dr. Shreve nodded his head slowly in understanding.
Ah, yes. There are many times in our lives when the past comes back to haunt us. You would certainly not be the first. So, what seems to be the trouble?
Peter ran a hand through his hair and shut his eyes, lest the shadow get the better of him with its vulture-like presence.
I see the shadow again. My shadow. The one I used to see on the island. It's back, and I can't seem to get rid of it.
Dr. Shreves wrote something briefly in his notes, the furrow between his brows creasing further.
Was the island the last time you saw the shadow?
He asked, choosing his words carefully.
Yes, until a couple of weeks ago, that is.
Peter answered, staring down at his hands, worrying his thumbs together and tapping his leg. The doctor's beady eyes took note of his anxious movement, but said nothing.
And was there some sort of catalyst for this? Some trouble at home or work?
Peter shook his head.
No, nothing. It's all been fine. I don't know why this has happened.
A few more scratches on the paper, and then Dr. Shreves leaned back in his armchair.
Do you see the shadow now? Is it in the room?
Peter glanced to his left, where the shadow sat, leaning forward eagerly.
That's it, Peter. Tell the doctor you're seeing things. We can have so much fun together, just the two of us, when they lock you up away. I wonder if they'll give you one of those long-sleeve jackets, so you can't wriggle free.
It was only the smallest of glances and a quick nod of the head, but Dr. Shreves followed his gaze to the shadow cast on the wall.
I see.
He said quietly.
And does the shadow talk to you? Does it tell you to do things you don't want to do?
Peter nodded, and a cackle came from inside his head.
Oh, Peter, don't lie to the doctor now. I never told you to do anything you didn't want to do.
Dr. Shreves opened an old file lying on a side table and consulted his notes for a moment.
If I recall correctly, the first time you saw the shadow was on the island. You said it helped you survive. It is often the case when our minds are under extreme distress that they create falsehoods to keep us going past the point of exhaustion. The way a man dying of thirst in the desert might imagine water on the horizon. Has there been anything recently that is troubling you? Perhaps bringing up those memories when you relied on the shadows to survive?
Remember, Peter, I kept you alive, and this is the thanks I get. We had a deal. I would help you survive, and you would help me escape Neverland. You knew this would come. One day.
Peter rubbed his temple, trying his best to ignore the voice.
No, nothing. But it says I owe it for helping me escape from the island.
Across from him, Dr. Shreve suddenly held his hand still, surveying him over his pen.
It's speaking to you now, the shadow.
Clamping his mouth shut, afraid he'd said too much, Peter swallowed the stone in his throat, eyes darting to the shadow for fear it was right and he would be thrown in some loony bin.
It's okay, Peter.
Dr. Shreve said, seeing the panic rising in his patient.
It's okay to be honest with me. There is no judgment here.
Don't be a fool, Peter. He's trying to play nice, so it will be easier to lock you away.
Gritting his teeth, Peter forced himself to make eye contact with the doctor.
Yes, it's talking to me all the time now. I can barely sleep. It won't go away.
He hesitated, running his tongue over the back of his teeth, uncertain whether or not he should continue.
I don't know how much longer I can keep going with this voice in my head. It's becoming more and more difficult to separate reality from this falsehood.
The shadow's head turned slowly to stare at Peter. Waves of loathing emanated from the dark silhouette.
I am not the falsehood, Peter. You are the falsehood, lying to yourself. All I ever did was protect you. Perhaps...
Dr. Shreve said, touching the end of the pen to his chin.
we have been looking at this from the wrong angle. I'd like to invite you to lean back and close your eyes. Put the shadow out of sight and out of your mind.
Peter obeyed and listened as Dr. Shreves went on.
Now, when the mind is severely stressed, it can sometimes revert back to its base animal instincts. This shadow, as you call it, represents a part of you that has suffered a terrible tragedy and survived it. Like a soldier come home from the battlefield, your mind can slip back into the time when you were forced to rely on instincts to survive. Now, in your case, the traumatic event was when you were shipwrecked on an island, the one you call...
He checked his notes briefly.
Ah, yes, Neverland. I'd like you to remember for me, how did you survive and escape Neverland? Walk me through it, and we'll put that shadow to rest when we're done.
Peter didn't want to. Every fiber of his being seemed to pull at him to stand his ground and glue his lips shut.
Don't tell him anything, Peter. No one will understand what it takes to survive Neverland. No one but you and me.
It was the shadow's words that spurred him on. If the shadow didn't want the truth to be told, then he would tell it. Settling back, deep into his mind, Peter followed the spark of hovering light that bounced around like a pixie into the dark recesses of his mind. And there, he dug up the chest of things he'd long since buried. And the words came forward, the voice of a child, from a closed chapter of his life floating out from his lips.
The boat ran aground on a reef. A bad storm came during the night, pushed us onto a tilt. I don't really recall the details well now. My father was there with his boss and some others from work and their families. The storm got really bad. We were so far off course, they didn't even know where to look for us. Days turned into weeks. The island, Neverland. It changed people. They became monsters, savage, vicious, bloodthirsty monsters. But they kept their human masks on, so nobody could see the truth. My mother and father wanted to go for help, make a raft of some kind and try to sail back home, but the crocodile got them.
Crocodile?
Dr. Shreves crooked a brow.
Mr. Crocker, one of the solicitors who worked with my father, I think. But by then he had become a crocodile. sneaking around unseen in the water.
Images flashed in his mind. Bloody teeth, red-stained clothes, tiger sharks swarming to the reef, long blonde hair caught around the coral. A string of pearls returned to the sandy ocean that bore them.
Peter, Peter, bottom feeder, had a mother till the croc did eat her.
Peter tried to push the words from his mind, but a vice-like grip fixed itself around his heart. His knuckles turned white as he tightened his grip on the arms of the chair.
The crocodile killed them.
Dr. Shreves asked tentatively, noticing the sweat on Peter's brow. Peter wanted to let out a laugh, as sick as it was. No, the crocodile had earned his name. He wasn't just a monster who killed people. He hadn't just killed Peter's parents. The absurdity of the moment cut into Peter's mind like a harpoon through the gut. Here he was, in the most civilized country in the world, trying to explain the world of monsters that he had survived. How could this doctor possibly understand? Peter had survived Neverland. No, this man could never understand. Pan's story had no place in this civilized world, and Peter could not tell his story to this man, surrounded by books and comfy chairs, so far from the feral, vicious hellscape he had survived for months as a mere child. But that wasn't the whole truth of it. The truth was far worse. Because the crocodile hadn't just killed his parents. The crocodile ate them. People got scared after that. The monsters and everyone started to come out then. The captain of the ship took a longshoreman's hook and put it through Tommy's eye. Tommy had been younger than Peter, chubby, missing his 2 front teeth. After that, everyone ran away into the jungle. Like the other prey, he tried to stay clear of the ship and the crew at all costs, because the pirates became their predators, roaming in a pack, searching for stragglers. But Peter was fast and slippery. Several times he managed to outrun the slower adults. That didn't stop the hunters from hunting him, though. They would appear in their pack, led by the captain, combing the island with his hook in hand, searching for fresh meat. Gunshots would sound every once in a while, until they ran out of bullets. It was so quiet after that. Not even the animals made a noise. It was like the island was holding its breath, waiting to see who emerged as king of the corpses. Peter didn't have a gun. He had a sharp rock he had fashioned into a knife, but he was just a child, alone, starving, desperate, and weak. So Peter ran, as if his feet had more of a mind than he did. He simply ran, hid, waited for rescue. But the days and nights drew on, and no ship came. Hope bled out of the child who knew monsters were real. Hook had almost caught him a few times, chasing him all over Neverland, but Peter was fast and could fly through the forest better than he could. And then he found the other lost boys, Sammy, Kit, Charlie, and Niall. They had made a camp in part of the forest, sleeping in a huddled pack at the back of a muddy outcropping of rocks that formed into a small cave. They were starving, each boy able to count his ribs and feel the ridges of his spine. The hunger drove them out to fish in the tide pools. That's how they got Charlie. Peter could still feel the wet sand beneath his bare feet. The scent of blood and salt water filled his nose. He was screaming at Charlie to run as his own legs fled, beating down the sand for the cover of the trees. The pirates dragged Charlie's body away in the fishing net they had finished patching with vines that day before. Back when he was only a boy, full of fear and tears, before he had met the Shadow. But seeing Charlie dragged away in his own net had given rise to an idea. If his body was not that of a brave, strong adult, it didn't mean he couldn't fight back. He was sharpening sticks, his hands still coated in mud from digging a pit to use them in, when the shadow first came to him. Using a stone to grind down the tip of the wood, he tested the tip with his thumb to ensure it was sharp enough to pierce flesh.
Careful.
A voice said. His eyes darted around, but saw only his own shadowed silhouette staring back at him.
You don't want to be the one who gets skewered, now do you, Peter? Now, who will be the first, I wonder?
The shadow leaned against the stick.
I'll kill them all,
He ground out, picking up another stick to sharpen against the rock.
All? Perhaps one or two if you get lucky, but you can't possibly expect to best them all. You're just a boy, and they are men.
They're monsters, not men, monsters. I'm building monster traps. They may be bigger than me, but I'm faster and I'm clever. They're not going to make a meal out of me.
With a final word, he drove the makeshift spear into the ground.
I know a thing or two about monsters. I could help you. In exchange for a favor.
Peter eyed the shadow with a shred gaze.
What kind of favor?
The kind that gets us both off this island. The kind that keeps you alive.
Thinking back now, Peter desperately wished he had hesitated, or given it a moment's pause before he agreed. But he didn't. Peter had nothing, no one to help. All the other Lost Boys were smaller than he was, and whatever manner of monster this shadow was, it was certainly better to have on his side than that of the pirates. He reached out his hand and touched the shadow, letting him in without a second thought. And the shadow had been right. The shadow taught him how to become the predator he needed to be in order to survive. He became one with the island, and the shadow was always with him, keeping him safe. The shadow was the one who helped him track down the other Lost Boys, Timothy and Leonard. And then they found the Darlings, hidden in a cove on the other side of the island. Their grandfather still lay dead in the cove, his hand clutching a silver pocket watch, glassy eyes staring at the sunset beyond the mouth of the cove. A wound on his leg reeked of rot, and the flies hovered above, waiting for the meat to ripen. Peter had no illusions when he saw the size of his group grow, and when the Darlings looked to him as their hero, he knew he had to do whatever he could to keep them safe. When Michael asked where the meat from the cook fire came from, Peter told him it was a wild boar he had chased through the forest and trapped. The boys did not question him, their bellies ignoring any protests their hearts and minds held. Only Wendy held back as the others ate their fill. Her big, blue eyes looked at Peter, haunted and terrified, asking Peter the question she dare not speak aloud. Peter pressed a skewer into her hand and told her,
Eat. It's just meat.
Her blue eyes blinked at him, holding back tears as she raised the charred meat to her lips and tore into it with her teeth. If she noted the silver pocket watch hanging from Peter's belt, she said nothing. When Peter turned his back to the fire and the scent of the roasted meat, the shadow tilted its head in praise.
Well done, Peter. Soon it will be your enemies burning in the flames.
And slowly but surely, Peter made the island work to his advantage, for he was the king of Neverland. And with the shadow at his side, no one could stand in his way. He took 3 of Captain Hook's crew before the pirate gave chase. Peter had set traps well, and while the other 3 might have fallen into them, he knew he would need more than trickery on his side. He needed bait. And what better bait could he offer than himself? It was so simple. All he needed was bait. And what better bait than the elusive Peter Pan? He walked out of the woods one night, a torch burning in his hand, casting his shadow on the beach beside him.
Be patient, Peter. Let him come to you.
And so he waited until the captain himself came out, hook in hand, a sick smile on his face. It took every last bit of his willpower to stand his ground as the hook gave chase. He waited until he saw the glint of his gold tooth before he turned and sprinted into the forest. His feet barely touched the ground. He ran so fast, flying through the forest of Neverland. His feet so fast they hardly kicked up dust. Hook stayed on his tail, but he was a full-grown adult, slow and stumbling in the dark.
Fly, Peter. As soon as you see the North Star, leap and fly.
He rounded a stack of boulders, and a clearing opened up ahead. Shining down, the North Star glimmered high above. With as much strength as he could muster, he leapt like a shooting star toward the heavens. But Hook was hot on his heels, and his boot fell down on the ground behind him, and the earth fell away. Only Wendy's quick reflexes and her outstretched hand saved him from falling into the mouth of the gaping pit. Piercing howls came from the dark pit. In the light of the moon, the stakes in the pit stood up like pointed teeth, and there, squirming like a worm, was the captain, still holding his hook, caught on the teeth, leaving a trail of blood on the protruding spikes. One by one, the Lost Boys passed around the flame, lighting their torches. Then Peter lowered down his torch in the silence around the circle. Only the gentle tick of the pocket watch lingered between the captain's haggard breaths. And then he began to laugh.
Are you going to kill me, boy? Think you're a man, little Peter Pan?
He coughed, divulging into maniacal laughter. The shadow clung to his skin as he crouched down, and when he spoke, the shadow's words came through his lips.
I already have. It's just a matter of time. Tick-tock, Captain. Tick-tock.
And then he tossed his torch into a pile of dead wood behind him, as did the others, and they retreated into the darkness, save for Pan, who waited until dawn when the smoke became visible. He listened to the curses and deranged ramblings of the dying man. The blood had formed a sticky puddle at the base of the spears holding him aloft. The crunch of leaves and breaking sticks sounded as the North Star above faded into the coming light of dawn. Pan kept his gaze steady as the crocodile stepped out into the open, his harpoon ready, eyes wide and wild.
He's all yours,
Pan said, standing up and kicking a rock into the pit. Slowly, he stepped back, retreating into the woods. The sound of screams faded slowly as he made his way to the beach, where the others were waiting. Wendy ran to him, tears streaked down her dirty face. She threw her arms around him. He felt the shadow recoil inside him at her touch, but when she pulled back, she was smiling and pointing to the horizon, where the dawn's light revealed a boat approaching from the distance. They saw the smoke from the fire. Was saved. We're going home, she sobbed in relief, taking his hand and pulling him down to the edge of the water, where she waved with the others at the approaching ship. Though it was not relief Pan felt at the sight of rescue. Pan watched the other children in a daze, looking back over his shoulder to the column of smoke rising into the sky, with whatever carnage was left at the base of it. The trap he had set, the death he had caused. Pan and the shadow could never leave the island. He would have to break his promise. The shadow stretched to the trees in the bright glow of the early dawn sun. Taking his sharpened stone knife from his belt, he crouched down and cut a line in the sand, pushing the blade into the sand deep enough to bury it once he had finished it. No civilized soul should know what happened here, so he swore to himself he would never speak of it. Never tell the truth. Never let them know what it had taken to survive. Never speak of Neverland. Aboard the Darling's ship, he and Wendy locked eyes, a silent promise passing between them. And piece by piece, as they sailed away from Neverland, they buried more than memories of what had happened, locking away the horrors too unspeakable to name. Peter wondered how, after all the time, the Darlings never realized they'd brought back 6 children and 1 demon. Didn't they hear the ticking of the pocket watch counting down the seconds? Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
Peter?
Opening his eyes, Peter glanced over at the sound of the voice. Dr. Shreves was leaning forward over Peter, the deep furrow in his brow and his beady eyes looking at him with concern.
Mr. Pan, are you all right? You've been quiet for some time.
Dr. Shreves said, a look of relief on his face as Peter opened his eyes.
I was afraid you'd fallen asleep. Wouldn't be the first time, mind you. It's a comfortable chair.
He joked. Peter snapped his eyes over to the wall, where the shadows stared back at him, gripping the arms of the chair with vice-like intensity. He had severed the connection from the shadow before. He could do it again. Before he knew what he was doing, he was on his feet.
I have to go.
He stammered.
And this was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
He was already heading toward the door, putting his coat back on as he headed out into the pouring London rain, leaving a baffled, beady-eyed Dr. Shreves tripping over his words at the sudden departure.
Oh, wait, Mr. Pan, please, we are just starting. I assure you, it was quite helpful.
He shouted over his shoulder.
Do come again, if I can be of any more assistance.
Dr. Shreves called out helplessly after him. The words failed to reach Peter's ears as he hurried into the pounding rain. His feet carried him from cobblestones to a muddy path until he was standing before a tall tree in Hyde Park, split in 2 from a lightning strikes, decades long past. Between the gnarled roots he knelt, prostrate before the hulking tree, rain-soaked, hands curling into the overgrown grass and dandelions.
Pray now, are we, Peter? Do you really think this will change anything?
The voice whispered behind his ear. Peter made no response, spreading out his fingers and smoothing them through the green fescue, leaves and mud. The knees of his trousers soaked through in seconds, but Peter paid no mind to his clothes, comfort, nor his appearance. Instead, he dug his fingers into the mud, tearing at the matted roots like a dog digging up a bone. He didn't stop, scraping his hands against sharp stones, sticks, and stubborn roots. Worms and insects fled and shrank beneath his hurried hands. But he knew he was getting closer. It was here, somewhere beneath the layers of forgotten earth. He had to find it. The rain formed a puddle in the hole where he had dug deeper and deeper, not that Peter minded. He soldiered on, soaking his coat sleeves and dragging his fingers blindly through the muck, pulling out stones and rocks, until he felt something smooth beneath his fingertips. Out of the dirty water, half coated in mud, came a flash of silver. Heart hammering, Peter rinsed it off in the puddle and wiped away the remaining clumps of dirt on his coat to reveal the silver pocket watch he had buried here long ago, back when he was just a boy, staying in London with the Darlings, an orphan lost in the madness of the city, burying his sins where his rescuers would never find them. Grit caked the outer edges of the frame as he pried the pocket watch open. Rainwater spattered the glass surface of the clock face. Hesitating, he ran the pad of his thumb over the crown, uncertain if he wanted to know whether or not the timepiece still worked. Holding his breath, he wound the crown at the top, feeling the tiny gears struggle and grind inside the metal shell. And then the tiny hands inside the pocket watch began to move. Tick, tick, tick. A low, dark chuckle reverberated inside his head.
Tick-tock, Peter. You're running out of time.
Glancing about, Peter quickly got to his feet and shoved his dirty hands inside his pockets, still clenching the pocket watch tightly in his fingers. Hurrying away, Peter's thoughts ran wild, none of it coherent as the shadow in his mind chuckled darkly along with the tick, tick, tick of the pocket watch in his grasp, beating and tittering like a hummingbird's heart. Passerby crossed the street to avoid him. One woman clutched her purse tighter to her, as if she feared he might take it from her. A child saw his mud-covered visage and fled on his bike back the way he had come, but Peter didn't care about any of them. The ticking of the pocket watch was all that drove him, pulsing beneath his palm in time to match the frantic beating of his heart. He had to make the ticking stop. As his mind buzzed with a frenzied energy, he felt convinced that this was what would sever his connection to the shadow. Somehow, there had to be a way to destroy it and sever that connection. Only then would he, Peter, be free from the shadow and the lingering nightmare of Neverland. When he arrived home, shivering and soaked through to the bone, he didn't even bother struggling off his coat. Dropping to the floor, he wrenched the hatchet out of the floor and put the pocket watch down on the table. The engraved initials could still be read. LTD. Louis Theobald Darling, the ghost that he had taken back with him from Neverland. Raising his arm, he whispered,
I'm sorry, Mr. Darling.
And with a forceful swing, he brought the hatchet down, shattering the glass of the face of the pocket watch, breaking it apart into pieces. The tiny cogs and gears within the mechanism were still at last. The severed hands no longer ticked by the minutes or hours. No memory of life remained within the engraved shell. And for a moment, all was quiet and still. There was no shadow on the wall but his. Peter stared at it and laughed, a sharp, half-mad cackle in relief. It was over. It was done.
Come now, Peter. You didn't really think it would be that easy to get rid of your own shadow, did you?
The voice asked, low and cold. Icy terror chilled down his spine.
No, you can't still be here.
Frosty words curled around his neck, down through his body to the tips of his fingers and toes.
But I am, Peter. I'm not going anywhere. You can't bury me like a pocket watch or pretend I'm not real. I am part of you.
Trembling, Peter braced himself against the table.
No, there has to be a way. I did it before. I left you behind in Neverland.
With a crushing blow, he brought his fist hurling down onto the table. Pieces of the pocket watch went flying. Several cogs and gears landed in front of him, as did the tiny minute hand, spinning like the point of a compass until it finally settled, pointing back at his fist upon the table. And then an idea came to him, a mad idea. He raised his hand, the hatchet gleaming in the light. The dark, cackling laughter in his head came to an abrupt stop.
Lower your hand, Peter. Don't be a fool.
In that moment, hearing the shadow's warning only strengthened his resolve. With one last look at the shadow on the wall across from him, he raised the hatchet and swung it down hard upon his wrist, severing his hand from his body. Blood pulsed from the wound as he staggered back away from the table, where the fingers of his hand still touched the shadows. Peter staggered back, laughing in hysteria with his freed stump. Falling to his knees, Peter laughed at the anguish of the crumpling shadow across from him.
Go back to Neverland.
He spat before his vision blurred and he fell to the floor, watching the growing pool of crimson blossom beside him before the world went dark. Light was the first thing to greet Peter when he awoke in a small room, sectioned off by rows of beds and curtains. The second was the sound of an angel whispering his name. Peter? Oh, thank all in heaven you're awake. A weight pressed into him, and the familiar scent of lilac soap filled his nose.
Wendy?
He asked, his throat tight and raspy. He blinked several times as she sobbed into his chest. When she looked up at him, she had tears in her big blue doe eyes. Oh, Peter, I was so worried. Peter glanced around the room and saw a bottle of saline solution dripping down into a tube that ran under the blanket in his arm.
Am I in the hospital?
he asked. Wendy nodded, her curls bouncing as she did so. Wiping her eyes with a lace handkerchief, she peered briefly up at the ceiling to try and hold back her tears. I stopped by to ask how the appointment with Dr. Shreves went, and I found you. She cut off as fresh tears flooded from her face despite her efforts to stem them. Peter waited, still in a fog, his body stiff and leaden. Peter, you were in a pool of blood, your blood. It looked as if you... She lowered her voice and glanced over her shoulder to be sure they were alone in the ward. Like you had cut your own hand off.
I did. Wendy.
What do you mean you did? Peter, how could you? Why on earth would you...
The shadow, Wendy. I told you. Couldn't get rid of it. I had to do something.
He hated seeing the hurt in her eyes. He could take the anger, but the hurt cut so deeply. All he wanted was to take her pain away. Wendy looked down into her lap, shaking her head and sniffing back tears, but somehow drops still speckled her pale blue dress. You shouldn't have done it, Peter. It was madness to think... No, you clearly weren't thinking. God, I'm so angry with you. That was your hand, Peter. Your hand. Peter glanced around the room, checking the corners to be sure.
No. Wendy, I was right. The shadow is gone. I got rid of it.
He almost grinned his old peevish grin, in spite of himself. But when she didn't smile back, he dropped it.
Wendy, it will be okay. I'm free now. Free from Neverland. It will be all right. You'll see.
With eyes shining full of trickling tears, Wendy's chin wobbled and she shook her head. No, Peter. No, it won't. She pulled back the blanket covering him, and there, attached to the end of his left wrist, was a curved metal hook. A low, dark chuckle emanated from deep down at the back of his throat as he twisted the hook that had replaced his hand. The chuckle turned into a laugh, and Wendy reeled away from him as he devolved into a sickening fit of hysteria as his laughter grew louder and louder. No, he would never be free of Neverland. And so, Peter submits to the past, to himself. Or does he? The past has a way of lingering, always waiting in the shadows, ready to claim what's left of us. But for now, we leave him trapped in the darkness of his own memories, idly afloat in an ocean of madness. Thank you for joining us through Shadow Haunting, The Chilling Tale by Noelle Mills. I wonder, did you have to keep the lights on? If so, don't be too sure that they'll keep you safe. Light casts shadows, after all. If you've enjoyed the story and want to dive deeper into more tales of terror, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future updates. For more nightmares and unsettling stories, check out coagulation.org and hit the link to buy Coagulation 8 Nostalgia with our printing partner, lulu.com. To help the Coagulation Foundation's work to create a more inclusive future in science fiction and horror media, join our esteemed family of supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoagulationfoundation. Remember, sometimes it's not the monsters outside that you should fear, but the ones hiding in the shadows within. Thank you for watching, and Godspeed sleeping tonight. Happy nightmares!